Friends, welcome to Forsyth's Divina Imaginatio. In this video, we are going to look at the very high summit of the imagination of Proclus. Now, Proclus is the 450 AD philosopher whose philosophy is now, shall we say, in the beginning stages of being hauled out of the cobwebs where he was hiding under the garments of materialism for a very, very long time. In this video, we are going to look at the very, very high summit of the divine fantasy in Proclus. And we are going to begin with these following statements that it's generally held that in today that logos and mythos is the two sources of knowledge in antiquity. But there is a third source, the Theologia Mystica, which we mentioned in our video 8, or I think, of Synesius, when he alludes to the arcana of the mysteries, the veiled and the hidden, the inner chambers of the world psyche, and its most hidden and unknown summits. This internal alchemy of and spirituality, the elevation of human imagination to the summits of deity, through which ancient avatars and Christian saints drew their inspiration and their world perspective, their depth and their teachings. We are also going to look at eternity or aeon. In our previous video 10a, we have mentioned, not in depth, but mentioned the aeon of Jung and the philosopher Corbin, the Arabic Iranologist Corbin, and what they say about their aeon. And we are going to see what the aeon is, the aeon or eternity of Proclus comprises towards the end of our video. Theologia Mystica, the vision of Moses, the vision of Christ on the Mount, the Hermetic vision, and the vision of the elevation of the human soul in Plato's Republic. They all have in common an inner alchemy of formation and silent divina imaginatio. The mysteries of Ulysses, the fables of Homer, and the hymns of Orpheus, the oracles of Zoroaster, the psalms of David, the ground of being of Meister Eckhart, the writings of Sankara, the Tao Te Ching, all possess in the summit of their thought mystical and theological conceptions. Now, our winged spiral staircase, going up and up, a beautiful image, classical, primordial image, if you like. I don't mean that to be sitting in the beginning of time either. That's not the true meaning of it. But in any case, we form part of our discourse around this beautiful image of a spiral staircase, which possess mystical, mathematical, and geometric aspects through which its beauty arises. The point which is depicted here, connecting the radii to a circle with encountered this point in our video 7 already. So the point was is emanating radii bounded by a circle, forming an infinite revolving spiral through time. This is a remote alchemical spiritual symbol in this particular context of us, around which infinite multitudes of beings infinitely and eternally revolve. This image of the revolving spiral connected through radii to the point may be viewed as a certain remote alchemical sign that indicates to us the self-moving expression of eternal intellect and the self-convertive, self-turning revolutions of the vastness of the heavens and the celestial world. This inward-looking in-turning or in-churning, it's the idea of revolutions and turning in many dimensions, the power of the divine fantasy in potentia, divina imaginatio in potentia, is a most ancient principle and is the very essence of all forms and alchemical spiritual formation. Indeed, this internal formative alchemy forms through its energy and activity and potential an alchemical interforming learning system, also for us, with all human souls, that is implicit within our world experience and implicit within higher order dimensions. But what we do not see is the invisible, the abiding, the emanating, and the returning world of divine imagination and world formation. In this circle, we have ousia or being. There's many other meanings of this. As a wholeness, our glass spheres, as we indicated in video 5 or 6, depict wholeness, a nested wholeness, being right in the very center of wholeness. So it also depicts an abiding cause as the summit of a triangle, with the triangles classical in Plato. Here we have divine imagination, formation proceeding, projection or emanation, and we have an inward turning or a returning to the Father. If we unfold this image, we may say that abiding being is connection, incorporeally touching all sides, connecting all formations circularly within itself. And we may say primarily the self-being primarily holds, unfolds, and enfolds all proceeding and progressing formations of spirit and the soul of the world and the all. In this, on the basis here, we have power in potentia, formation proceeding. We have, this also is known as dunamis in Greek, energy, activity, comprehending, touching on all sides. So being is the ultimate wholeness, simplicity, that is holding the whole world through its connection. Real being, surrounding within its comprehension the multitudes of differences proceeding and dissimilars progressing, of differences of the dissimilar, the multitudes of differences proceeding and dissimilars progressing in every forming order of the many. Living being, the connection, a wholeness, comprehends within itself the middle and the extremity, says Proclus. We are coming to this. Hence, living being contain the primary relation of connection with all likenesses or idioms, energies and powers within itself, an interior relation with being, formation, interforming relation through being. So being is one relation with the whole of a forming world, and living being circumscribes within itself the formation of the whole world, or the all of Balboa. In our own world, this spiral symbolizes an infinite moving waveform that revolves around its center of mass. It's very interesting how, I forgot his name now, his YouTube name is 3 Brown and 1 Blue, how he explains with his Fourier transform series how waves have a center of mass around which they infinitely revolve. Our angelic wings indicate divine imagination and the silent alchemical inner ascent and descent of the human soul, and of all many other beings in the world. Wings indicate to us thus the psychical, self-moving world formation of the Divine Mother of the Greeks and the more ancient people. The flowing movement of form within the all or the whole world. The flight associated with wings, which we see, which Corbin mentioned in our previous video. He mentions Plato, that Plato still has the ultimate indication of the flight of the meaning of wings, with the 2 horses, the wild horses, the opposites that have to be brought under the control of the soul. Flight then associated with wings indicate the interior alchemical processes who elevate through their interformation the human psyche and world movement toward the good itself and of all natures. This is an infinite process, and the form of the good and the formation of multitudes of beings hastens throughout the world their highest mystic flight, indicate this summit, the good, the beautiful, and truth. Wings indicate to us a world progressing upon a deific hierarchy, beginning with the fountain of living being itself. Depicted in this 10th century image, which we found in the Aurora Consurgence in our previous video, we see Hermes with his wings standing with his feet on the earth. Wings indicate mystically the opposition of movement and stasis or rest. Some psychical movements are abiding causes, rest or stasis, preceding principles, and others moving, proceeding, and progressing, forming to external multitudes of existence. Hence, ancient Orpheus says, with winged speed, ideas leaped forth from one fountain, for both the counsel, feminine, and the end, masculine, were from the Father. The King, Father, previously placed in the multiform world, an intellectual, incorruptible impression, the vestige or likeness of which, hastening through the world, causes it to appear invested with form. A holographic impression, there is a dynamic vibration and instantaneously forming in any form of consciousness or dimension. It might not be very obvious, but it struck me with this image that I saw in the works of Orpheus, that there is a world representation of likeness of the father of and mother in the world. There is represented in every part of space and time in our dimension. There are higher dimensions too that is perceived, and this is also something I discovered in Orpheus, that have their own world of perception. Our world is not the only world of perception. But it struck me that David Bohm's holographic impression has more ancient precedents. Lastly, wings indicate to us that silent internal psychical alchemy is inward-looking, elevating, or anagogic, as Plato says. The inturning or enfoldment of the power of divine fantasy in potentia is a most ancient principle, and is the very essence of internal alchemical learning processes occurring simultaneously upon many inner levels. Indeed, they underlie our own self-experiencing world and the formation of higher self-experiencing worlds within the all, or the whole of the world. Now, it's at this point important for us to note that Carl Jung definitely avoids mentioning this inner alchemy of the later Platonists like Proclus in his use of the quadrivium or the tetrads of Plato. We'll come back to this in a bit. That, therefore, the manifest world possessed with its depths and breadths and mystical, alchemical, mystical, spiritual aspects is not very well known to be the summit of the mystical alchemy of the human soul of Proclus and early Christian thought, and is perhaps lost in retranslation over 2,000 years. Nor is it obvious that the Theologia Mystica of Synesius and the late Platonists, Plotinus, Proclus, and Taylor, and Balboa, the modern Platonists, New Platonists, pertain entirely to an internally winged spiritual intelligence. The internal alchemy of inner intuition and comprehension of the Platonic imagination, wholeness, and the forming world. In our video 10, Living Optics, we in many ways indicated that to see is to form. Critical to our inner eye, seeing is comprehension. That which has not been comprehended yet, and which is in infinite potentia, and which each individual comes to discover for him or herself through cultivating attention, evolving our understanding, and inner alchemy of formation of divine intuition. Perhaps we may begin to see that our seeing, which is instantly forming, is a unity or wholeness. A gestalt is the word that flies around these days. Is not the only kind of seeing, all alone and by itself in the world. Our seeing is the principality of and unity within our understanding, our self-knowledge, and our comprehension, and divine intuition formation within our intellect. Higher order awareness perceive within their own dimension of consciousness is the most ancient knowledge, and this can be seen in the hymns of Orpheus of long ago. Spiritual intelligence indeed possess spiritual sight, as arcane and mystic fountains, ever abiding. Some spiritual intelligences are living fountains, sources of subordinate principles proceeding, comprehending the whole world or the all within their wholeness. Still other intelligences progressing according to the simultaneous existence of opposition, of same and different, and similar and dissimilar, are intellectually moved according to division, separation, and difference. For everywhere the winged, the unrestrained feminine supercosmic forming fantasy comprehends and brings forth the formation of movement of form throughout the encosmic or mundane world of Taylor, of which there is an infinite forming harmonic abundance. This forgotten world of the ever-living being or self, of immaterial spiritual intelligence and of supercosmic formation precedes our corporeal world of habits. That is to say, illuminated living being precedes the perpetual formation of the mundane world or the encosmic world of Balboa through the inner activity and power that brings forth the perpetual subsistence of living form fields. Now, I find it very interesting that Rupert Sheldrake, the wonderful biologist, have his ideas of morphic resonance and fields, pre-existing fields. And here I find this very same idea of habits. Form comes into habit, say the ancients, in the mundane or in cosmic world. Form precedes matter, which is similar to also similar to Michael Levine and his very interesting bioelectricity and the research he's doing around that. Here we have a very ancient idea that says that forms establishes themselves, they come into habitude in the cosmic world. Interesting how we forget things. Hence, living being, ever abiding, comprehends the all through its abiding power, its eternal living life, and through its dominion. And in this image, we have the good, the abiding power, which is a living being, eternal life, and dominion of intellect. We will clarify some of this later in the video. Comprehending within itself the incorporeal, the material and cosmic world, progressing to an exterior coming to be. Thus, the psychological habitudes comprehended within the cosmic mundane all are preceded by self-animating psycho-intellectual vitality and the unity of forms, comprehending within themselves all material and flowing movements. Movement of the soul, whoever unfolding and enfolding recurrence of forms in nature, is governed by preceding greater intelligent principalities. The coming into being and going out of existence through material changes in birth and death. From this we may already perceive a wonderful ancient opposition to the material and linear views we have today. And we wonder why such silence about this world-forming alchemy all this time. But perhaps this is the beginning of a new supermassive psychological circle for the inner alchemical elevation of all of humanity. From all these aspects, we may see that the light of the good is everywhere the cause of all things. That an immaterial winged spirit and intelligence, depicted here with our angel wings and the beautiful image of 10th century image of Hermes that we found in the Aurora Consurgence. Here we see that an immaterial winged spirit and intelligence precede formation of all things. We see that the brilliance of living light itself and irreducible and indivisible wholeness. There is no quantity involved here. This is a quality. That this living light, the brilliance of being, comprehends all parts participating within its interior, which indicate to us that the sacred always acts formatively, for this alchemical flow is eternal, immutable and pure, and not disturbed by matter. The questions then are what the nature is of our own presence in this world, and who is the summit of the sacred power and the activity of energy or light. This summit, the ancient Parmenides indicate mystically with the in Proclus the ineffable supereminence of the first principle of things, through which he indicate the first principle is exempt from all essence and knowledge, and that all likenesses, including man, is interconnected, our through line here, interconnected with living being. Hence we see that the most divine illumination of goodness comprehends and outforms or generates from within itself the profoundly united unity of all intelligence, of all fountains and causes. And we may perceive, after a long study and attention, that the most sacred of beings are connate, allied to goodness and the one beyond. Hence, we see ancient theologists indicate that deified light beings themselves say that they are the thoughts of God, and that they abide in the intellections of the Father, and that they go forth for the creation of the cosmos. Living, intelligent leaders, summits, and principles, archetypes, are the illuminated and illuminating fountains or well springs of the whole world formation. In our prior videos, we indicated that being itself is brought forth from the whirlpool of Orpheus or the cloud of Homer, the mixture of bound and infinity. And we indicated in many places in our videos that being itself comprehends within itself all uniform and united powers of all formation. The highest illumination, therefore, of living being constitutes an unknown absorption and illumination from within the one, the unknown and beyond. And a living being is the center of all connection to all illuminations irradiating from it through its wholeness, to all of living divinity and the supercosmic and encosmic, which are the same order in different authors. The supercosmic is my term for the assimilative supermundane order, because there is this supercosmic forming fantasy and the encosmic world formation of Balboa. The illuminated being, this illuminated being, possesses an essential, eternal, and unchanging subsistence of spirit, life, intelligence, power, and dominion. Living being comprehends, then, all spirituality, all divine intelligence, and constitutes within itself all eternal forming potentiality of all life and world formation. We wonder today where the origins of life is when we look straight down the scope of time, which amino acids first began to live and so forth. Perhaps we just forgot. Living being constitutes within itself all the eternal forming potentiality of all life and world formation, and comprehends within itself all of aeon, eternity. Eternity is self, is essence, says Proclus, all living power and all living emotion and all vitality, living life. Illuminated living being then is the source of all love and goodness, impart from within its very being all love and all good to all natures proceeding throughout the world. Here we see that beings of light are the causes of all motion, and that light-like beings are forms or ideas themselves. Some light beings are the causes of essential and living vital formations. Yet other light beings are the causes according to self-motive, self-moving, the cause of its own movement, and self-vital, self-living, self-energetic forming activity. Hence, there can be nothing proceeding through itself, through the world, without being dependent upon and touched by and owing its life to the movement of this illumination of living being or self. On this account, say the ancients, intelligent, formative light media are necessary for the formation of the incosmic all. We see that the illumination of illuminations, true being itself, is the hyparxis, the summit absorbed in its unknown depths within the good and the one beyond. This ineffable summit, says Taylor, the first internal projection, say I, immanifest, immaterial, and unproceeding, is a mingling of masculine and feminine energies or activity and power. The self, ever-abiding, living being, is simultaneously the cause of all life, power, and intellect, and ever-flowing motion and stasis. Living being itself comprehends aeon or eternity. And a living being is the cause of both symmetry and asymmetry, a unity comprehended in one simplicity. Here we see that being itself, through its dominion and power, comprehend within its unknown ambits, aeon or eternity, and all power, life, vitality, and emotion. And the living being comprehend within itself all living forms, the light-like beings who are eternally abiding dominions and powers. An illuminated simplicity indeed, within whose resonances all intelligence, spirit is intelligent, and intellectual and psychical formations possess their eternal subsistence. For it is within this harmony, vibration, of principled illumination, say ancient avatars, that the whole sensible expands and all living things are formed. Proclus observes that the participation of all sensible forms is comprehended within the simultaneous being of intelligible sameness and difference. This is intellect, proceeding to sensible likeness through the opposition of similitude and the dissimilar. Living spiritual beings or forms are the source principle, self-producing and generating their images or likenesses. And says he, self-producing. This internal alchemical investigation of form, which we embark upon when we learn a form, image, or likeness, is what leads our souls inwardly to higher perfection, an investigation of the good, whom we have a natural affinity. The perfect is eternal, the self-sustaining, stable power and dominion of one intelligent form, which we may summarize in one supermassive, instantaneous forming circularity as follows. I'm putting everything on here. I think it's better if we can see at once that these arrows indicate a circle. Now, this circle isn't apparent in our world. This is an unapparent, immaterial circle. In other words, a quality of formation. We have here on this side, we have living being, which is connective of all formations, our through line, living being, connective of all. We have living life, ever living life. It always is, always will be. Here is this level, no beginning in time, no units that you can count. Likewise, ideas like the monad, the duad, which we see here in our Orphic egg. The monad is a quality. It's not quantity at all, and it's not a duality. It is a unity that contains in itself difference. But this is an intelligible monad. In the intelligible world, the monad isn't the number one. It's not the unit one. Any rate, on this side we have the good and intelligible intellect, living being proceeding, intelligible intellect. The good is the desirable, the most perfect, and the sufficient. And here we have, from intellect, we have formation. So we have abiding, the good abiding, stasis, not moving. We have progression here. The world progresses from the world of Saturn, which is the monad of Zeus or the demiurgus. And we have returning, the world returning. And here our circles indicate the spiral moving up, and it's all dunamis, it's all energy and activity, and there is a through line with living being. So we have supermassive circle, and what else do we see in here? Well, we have the three hypostases immediately after the one of Plotinus: living being, intellect, and life. Life is enfolded, comprehended by being, and intellect is comprehended in life. And of course, there is soul that is comprehended within intellect. All our nested spheres, glass spheres, come into play here. Proclus further observes that in respect of forms of being, he says, forms must not be admitted to be the offspring progeny of blossoms of matter, as they were said to be by the Stoics, says he, nor must it be granted that forms, such as man, consist from a commixture of simple elements, such as atoms and crashing things. Nor must it be granted that beings or forms have the same essence with spermatic reasons of nature. For all these things evinces the subsistence of forms to be corporeal, imperfect, and divisible. Who is divine aeon or eternity? Divinity, says Proclus, produced both divine light-like beings, bound and infinity, at once and together. Hence, eternity or aeon is made manifest, comes into being through the mixture and illumination of bound and infinity. This bound and infinite, the duad of Proclus, is the same as ether and chaos, Phanetos, Phanes and night of Orpheus and Homer, and Isis and Osiris of ancient Egypt in the works of Iamblichus, and is the same with masculine and feminine deities of the 5 books of Moses. We see then that the feminine goddess infinity is chaos, uniting, comprehending within herself all power and all infinity, and comprehending other things, and as the most infinite of infinities. And Orpheus and Pythagoras indicate that infinite chaos is the first infinity, chaos which has no bound, and is alone infinite. Hence, she is the fountain and the hidden cause of all infinity, intelligible infinity, intellectual, that which belongs to soul, that which is a corporeal body, and that which is material. In this summit, we see a threefold unity. Power, hidden within the summit of the first feminine infinity, infinite feminine eternity is primarily power. And in this corner we have power, infinite potential, potentia, dunamis, and we have energy, power, and activity. So we have these 3 in the first infinity: power, energy or activity, and the good. So our icon here, this is an important message here, indicate mingling of divine energies and powers known by many different names: the glory of God, the cloud, the first like harmonics, music, melody, whirlpool, vortex, mingling, turning every which way, and infinite dimensions, as indicated by in many different theologies. The first chaos, most hidden and connate with goodness. Hence we see the feminine fountain of infinity supernally from her hidden datum, supplying the never failing of the world through Genesis, which is potentiality, impotentia, and activity, energy or power. And she supplies this to all essences within goodness: powers, energies, potentialities, periods of the soul, and all generations. Feminine infinity, or the Divine Mother, is the hidden, mystical, illuminated source and fountain, who brings forth from within her unfathomable depths thrice darkness, says ancient avatars, all supercosmic and cosmic world formation. From this first infinite fountain, says Proclus, which is infinite power, we may understand all infinities subsisting according to the feminine power which is there. It struck me with great depth, force actually, when I first came across, first began to understand that it's the Divine Mother that is the power of the Father. Who is in supermassive opposition to the first chaos or infinity? Ether. The first masculine bound, the name means the same thing, it's not two different things, is in opposition to chaos, the first alone and infinite power. The first ether or bound itself is the illumination of form and is the paternal boundary of all beings. Ether bounds and measures all things. But in addition to this, there is a second and a third interior formation of ether within divine imagination. The second ether, living being, form and motion, and subsisting according to eternity. And here we have ether and chaos, eternity, form and motion, a unity forming. There's no first and second units that we can count here. This is all in immaterial and incorporeal world. And these are not abstractions from sensibles, posterior abstractions. These are monads in themselves. So eternity is amongst the first of things, mingled from bound and infinity. The third ether is formed according to same and different in intellect, and it's also where number first appear, incorporeal number first appear. The third ether or bound, stability and immutability are the terms used in, because intellect is stable and immutable, and is that which subsists according to same and different in incorporeal intellect. To some, we have ether, first ether or first masculine bound in opposition, a supermassive opposition to the first alone infinite power, chaos. We have the idea of wholeness, which is a unity, a united unity, and eternity is a wholeness. Second ether is associated with form and motion, formation, subsists through eternity. The third ether is associated with same and different and one eternal life. And Proclus says eternity is the cause of wholeness in all subordinate dimensions. There is a wholeness preceding all formations, within which all formations form, in whose comprehension all formations form. So there's nothing alone and by itself here. There is the whole world is dependent on and comprehended by being. Now, if I thought it might be an idea to put down here a view according to living time and eternity, because there's a whole lot of ideas about time today, and I thought this would be an interesting thing for us to look at. So we have ether and chaos the cause, and opposition and alone power. And we have in the summit being, power, time, eternity, and wholeness. And here we have instantaneous formation and the opposition of living time. Okay, living time is the energy activity of being in motion according to formation and boundary. Boundary is a termination or an end, ether. Living time and opposition. Living time is infinite power, the potentiality of being infinitely in motion. Eternity is a wholeness prior to parts, a unity, measures unities exempt from beings. Hence we have the good, and we have the chaos, the first alone power. Living being is the connection between these two. This is one wholeness, one united unity. Ether is the masculine form and boundary, proceeding and progressing through separation and division through all forming worlds, and is the limit and boundary. Ether is the limit and boundary of all the progressing hierarchical genera that's connective of being to the last of things, which is indefinite and formless matter. Material form, which detains intelligible matter and circumscribes all infinity and formless nature, is the progeny of ether or bound. Material form. Hence, we may see being, bound, and infinity at once and together comprehend eternity within the hidden depth and breadth of their unseen and profoundly united unity. Hence, says Proclus, much celebrated eternity comprehends every intellectual infinity and power. For whence does intellect derive its eternal life except from the deity or divine being eternity? Eternity, therefore, is infinite according to power prior to intellect. Hence, eternity is primarily power itself. Why is there not a second and third infinity? Because there is no real spiritual or psychical separation or division of the Divine Mother or the whole of the feminine series. This infinite is omnipotent and perfect, containing in herself an intelligible multitude of parts, which she produces infinitely. Hence, the Divine Mother bodies forth goodness in every dimension of formation of the world or the all of Balboa. Thus, Orpheus describes the feminine royal queen Night, to whom Phanetos or Phanes hands his royal scepter, as king and as alone infinite power. To some, the one partaking of one being, the one beyond all else without words indescribable, the one partaking of being and living a being which is absorbed in the one, and both the first unknown power and feminine infinity and the first ether are connate with the good. These monads together are a profoundly illuminated, united unity and a simplicity. Simultaneously and at once brought forth eternity, wholeness through their power, potentia, and mingling energies. Here we can see that aeon is a wholeness governing the procession and the progression of the whole of the immaterial and the material world. And eternity is an illumination proceeding from the unity connected with being. Living being itself possesses an unknown hidden power and a boundary. Living being, illumination of illuminations, or the fountain of fountains, is beyond eternity or aeon. Living being comprehending at once within itself these monads or unities, manifesting in one wholeness and unity the three incorporeal hypostases of Plotinus: living being, life, vitality, intellect, motion. Hence, we can see that all life and all intellect and all soul are collectively all omnipotent power. And goodness, we can clearly perceive that being, that living being or living Christ, living Buddha, living Atman, living divine imagination without distinctions, everywhere touches all world formations. From all this, we can clearly perceive that within this Theologia Mystica of Proclus, Divine Mother Night, infinite power, nurse and midwife, gives birth to and brings forth from in her profound depths all beings and all formation of gods and men. Divina Imaginatio, the unproceeding, the most hidden illumination of illuminations. This part we have drawn from the works of Taylor, Balboa, Westering, and Pierre Grimes. Love, forgiveness, the inner doorway.